So meanwhile, I'm glad Madam Resident UNDP Resident Coordinator brought up the time 100 because yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal, and young women should use this opportunity. We have Fatu. Fatu has actually raised the bar for us, especially the few years that have passed by, all the accolades that she's able to gather. We can use her as a perfect example to also grow as young people. I would always, as a person who just got married recently, I would always ask myself, how does Fatu balance this? You know, she has boys, you know, she's running Will, you know, running a home and everything, and she's doing it so well, and and she's doing it so well. And I think for all of us, you know, have somebody to look up to. And you've raised the bar so high. Balal nyo nak. Balal nyo de. Wow, Suyage, we can't match. Suyage, she's going to raise the bar so high, it's going to be so difficult for us to catch up. But keep going. You are such an inspiration, and thank you so much for the work that you do. A round of applause once again. So the presentation will now start, where she will give an overview of the TRRC process and how far when it comes to TRRC recommendations as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jainaba, and thank you for those kind words. So we have some people who are also joining us online. So if you have any comments that you want to send through, please go ahead on the live chats and send through questions or comments as we do the presentation, but also later on during the conversations. So I will start my presentation on the Gambia's transitional justice. But first, I think it's important before we go further, we discuss what is transitional justice itself. And by definition, transitional justice refers to how societies respond to the legacies of massive and serious human rights violations. And this may include reforms of the legal and political system and institutions that govern a society. It can also be mechanisms that uncover truth about what happened previously and why it happened. Transitional justice may also include judicial and non-judicial processes, such as national or international criminal prosecutions to hold perpetrators accountable. They may also include initiatives for providing reparations to victims, which can take multiple forms, such as financial compensations, memorialization of victims, and the abuses they suffered. So the Gambia Transitional Justice, which is internationally referred to as the Gambian model, the Gambia embarked on a transitional justice process after the fall of President Yahya Jammeh's regime in 2016. For 22 years, we had a regime that was being accused of severe human rights violations. There were records of these violations, but as a country, we needed to have a way of documenting these violations. In December 2017, following public consultations, the National Assembly passed a bill establishing the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, which we all know as the TRRC. So as I speak moving forward, I'll be referencing it as the TRRC. So the TRRC was mandated to investigate and establish over 2 years an impartial historic record of the nature, causes, and extent of violations of human rights committed from July 1994, which is the time that President Jammeh took over with some military through a coup, to the time he lost the elections in January 2017 when he departed. So the TRRC looked at those years to find out what were these human rights violations that were being speculated, who did they affect, and that's how the Truth Commission started. So Transitional justice is an umbrella. So we adopted this approach. The Truth Commission was one of the approaches that we took. And a lot of Gambians are aware of the TRRC as a mechanism of a TJ that we adopted. But in addition to the TRRC, there were other arms of TJ that the Gambia also took. So for example, the Jane Commission. Have we all heard about the Jane Commission? Yeah, the Jane Commission was looking at state corruption, the mismanagement of funds. So in addition to the Jane Commission, we also had a Constitution Review Commission. You've all heard about the Constitution Review? Yeah. We also have a security sector reform, which is still ongoing. We also have a public sector reform. And on top of all this, we have the National Human Rights Commission. You hear my colleague Lena acknowledge their work. They are a body that is set up as a permanent independent body to promote and protect human rights in the Gambia. So before this whole process, we didn't have any mechanism that citizens can go to report violations. So the NHRC is one mechanism that is put for every Gambian, every citizen that is living in this country. If you have experienced any form of violation, you can go to the NHRC and report. And I think that is a big, another milestone for us as a country that is coming from a dictatorship era. So I will now move back to the TRRC. As I indicated, the Truth Commission was established by an act of parliament, and it was to look at the nature, causes, and extent of human rights violations and abuses committed between July 1994 to January 27, when former President Jammeh left the country. And also, our TRRC was also mandated to grant reparations to victims. So the TRRC was required by the TRRC Act to make public the report, the findings, and recommendations of the Commission. So the TRRC, before I just go on their findings and stuff, when the TRRC was ongoing, they had the secretariat, which also consisted of different departments. One particular department that the TRRC was, that it had was the youth and outreach engagement. And through that, young people in the Gambia participated in the TRRC process across the country, be it awareness raising, be it supporting victims within their communities, be it advocating for a more inclusive and participatory approach to the TJ process through music, through poetry, through drama, through art. I can see some people here who were part of this process. So young people have always been part of the Gambia's transitional justice process. So it is only right that today, now that the recommendations are out and they've been adopted by the government through the white paper, you are still engaged in the process. In addition to that, the diaspora played a crucial role, in fact, in taking Jammeh out. The diaspora worked really hard, advocated directly with families through social media until Jammeh was taken out. So we must always acknowledge the role that the diaspora played in hosting Jammeh out. In addition to that, when the TRRC was also ongoing, we know that a lot of people in the diaspora came back to the country to support the process. And some people are still here continuing with this process, either directly with the post-TRRC process or indirectly. And as we again move on with the post-TRRC process, we know that some of the challenges that we face as a country includes capacity, lack of capacity. So as we are again moving on through this process, we hope that the diaspora can also lend its hand once again to support the post-TRRC process through their experiences in the various sectors. But also we know that the diaspora is one of the biggest contributors in the Gambia's economic, in our homes, in the nation building. So we acknowledge their contributions. But most importantly also, and I think this is a part that many people, we don't emphasize enough, we know that the diaspora also were victims. There are people in the diaspora who were victims of the former regime. either directly or indirectly. For some people, even if they were not direct victims, because of the environment that the authoritarian regime created, many people stayed away from home. They couldn't visit home, they lost their family members. So there are a lot of layers of trauma, a lot of violations that also diasporans experience either directly or indirectly. So we must find a way to include them in this process. So now back to the TRRC report and its findings. So the TRRC, before I go on there, the TRRC had different partners. They had the formal actors, that is the government. So the TRRC was under and still under the Ministry of Justice as the leading implementing government institution. The commission was set up and they had a secretariat. And as I said, this secretariat had different arms, including the youth arm that ensured that young people participated. They had a gender unit, they had a statement-taking unit that made sure that people could access the TRRC and give their statements and stuff. They also had technical expert support. And again, the diaspora was very much part of this process. In the TRRC setup, most of their departments were led by people from the diaspora. So we appreciate that role. And again, I'll emphasize on the need to have them to continue this support. And also we had the media house. We all remember when the TRRC was ongoing, we were all glued on our TVs following the TRRC testimonies. But in addition to the formal setting under the ministry, informally also actors, civil society organizations like WIL, like WAVE, like ANECED, Fantanka, the Victim Center, the YELEF, we all worked on the site to support the TRRC process, where we took informal initiative to go into our communities, to engage in our communities and take the message of the TRRC back in our communities to ensure that they were aware how to participate. And a lot of this support was able to be done through the funding of UN agencies that supported the work that the TRRC. So I do appreciate Jainaba acknowledging the support that we continuously have received as civil society organizations. One of the reasons the Gambia TJ process is actually considered as a good practice is because of the role of CSOs, and we couldn't have done that without the support of our donors. And again, in addition to the formal, informal, we also had the international partners, again, like the UN agencies. We had bilateral partners and multilateral partners, regional bodies like the ECOWAS, the AU. They were all part of the process that supported either through financial or technical support throughout, and they continue to do that today. So the TRRC then came and produced a final report. After 2 years of taking statements, of witnesses giving their testimonies, and a report that they gathered through the investigations, they came out with 17 themes that covered, I have not listed everything, but they had the extrajudicial killings, murder and enforced disappearances, the Presidential Alternative Treatment Program, that was the forced HIV treatment program, the James witch hunt exercise, and sexual and gender-based violence, among other stuff. Now, if you want to have access to the TRRC report, it's available online on the Ministry of Justice, their website. You can also access it from the NHRC website. I think every Gambian need to read the TRRC report and familiarize ourselves with the recommendations, because we are all part of this process and we need to familiarize ourselves with it. So in the final report was published in December 2021. That's when the TRRC published its final reports. And the findings of the report indicated that during Jammeh's 22 years of dictatorship, remember the TRRC was looking at 1994 to early 2017. The TRRC found that during that time, Gambian citizens were subjected to severe human rights violations, including murder, enforced disappearances, torture, sexual violence, unlawful disappearances, and etc. The TRRC made a total of 265 recommendations in its final report that it submitted in November 2021. Now, what I appreciate about the TRRC recommendations, it was very broad. So some of the recommendations I've just put here. The TRRC recommended prosecutions of individuals responsible for unlawful killings, torture, sexual violence, and enforced disappearances, among others. The TRRC also recommended institutional reforms to strengthen the judiciary, the security service, as well as human rights protections in the country. The TRRC also made recommendations around reparations to victims. This could be in the form of financial compensations, psychosocial support, and community-based memorialization in an effort to remind the Gambian populace about what happened. You will know that the TRRC had the Never Again slogan that we've all used. And never again, in order for us to say never again, we must not forget what happened during the dictatorship. And truth-telling and memorialization, what that does is to remind people of the atrocities that had occurred, but also how do we prevent them. The TRRC also made recommendations around amnesty. It gave guidelines, recommendations that only those who fully disclosed their crimes and showed remorse be considered for amnesty. So when the TRRC produced this report and made their recommendations, they submitted it to the president, they submitted it to the government. So we now have a report. And the government took the report and accepted 263 of the recommendations. So the TRRC made 265. The government accepted 263 of the recommendations in the white paper. So you will hear the white paper. The white paper is what the government has accepted. This is the government writing and saying, okay, the TRRC, you said this, you made these recommendations. Okay, we are going to take action on these things and those and the other things. Now, some people may argue that we do say 263 recommendations were accepted. Some people argue that not all were accepted, some were noted. And by noting means that, okay, we see the recommendations. So we still need to go back and look into those recommendations again. So the two recommendations that were rejected by the government there was a recommendation on a ban on the mercenary judges. We had, during Jammeh's time, there were judges from other countries, particularly ECOWAS, that were serving as judges. And one of the things that the TRRC found was also some of these judges were responsible for authorizing certain violations that occurred during the authoritarian regime. And because of that, they recommended that we ban those judges. But because of we are part of the regional body, the Ministry of Justice had their own arguments as to why those recommendations were not accepted. In addition, one other recommendation that the TRRC had given was amnesty for Sana Sabally. In my previous slide, I had indicated that the TRRC made recommendation guidelines on amnesty for people who were open, who were truthful, who showed remorse about the crimes they've committed. So Sana Sabally was a victim and a perpetrator, and he testified. And one of the recommendations of the TRRC was that he should be given amnesty, and that was rejected by in the white paper by the government. And one recommendation that was ruled out was that the TRRC had recommended a 10-year ban on a former intelligence chief on the grounds that he did some misconduct by destroying evidence at the outside of the TRRC, evidence in the NIA buildings and stuff. So there was a recommendation for that individual to be banned from holding a public space for 10 years. However, the TRRC rejected that, the government rejected that recommendation. Their argument was that this was outside the mandate of the TRRC, because the TRRC, as I said, was supposed to look at violations between 1994, when Jammeh took power, and to 2017, when Jammeh left in January. So the government's argument is that when this thing happened, this incident, that is outside of the mandate of the TRRC. So they didn't accept that recommendation either. That one they ruled out completely. So in short, those were the recommendations. So now we are in the post-TRRC, and of course the government has already released an implementation plan, which I believe I have on one of my slides. According to the National Human Rights Commission, which is the body that is monitoring the implementation of the TRRC recommendations. What is the government doing? Out of these 263 recommendations that the government has accepted, which one of these have they implemented so far? But at the moment, only 16 out of the 262 accepted TRRC based on the report that I saw from the NHRC. Those are the recommendations that have been fully implemented. There are 192 recommendations that are still ongoing. 55 have not been implemented at all. This means just about 6% of the accepted recommendations have been implemented between 2021 to 2023. Now, the NHRC has expressed fears that at the pace that we are on, if this continues, for us to implement these recommendations, it will take us 30 years for us to achieve the implementation. So that is a very slow pace. We recognize the challenges in the implementation of the TRRC recommendations, but we also want to take this opportunity to encourage the government to increase and amplify, accelerate its effort in implementing these recommendations. So among the recommendations, among the ongoing recommendations are around justice and accountability. And we know that at the moment, the Special Prosecutor's Office Act as well as the Special Accountability Mechanism Act were all enacted last year. So things are happening that would allow us to actually prosecute and hold named persons accountable for their actions. We also know that reparations, and the Reparations Commission has already been set up and commissioners have already been sworn in, which is something that we work with victim communities, and it's something that victims are emphasizing the need for these processes to really be moved forward, because a lot of victims are dying, a lot of victims are sick, and they want to see not just justice, but also reparations happening. So at the moment, we have the commissioners sworn in, and hopefully we will see this process moving forward soon. And of course, the institutional reforms are also in the process, and we know that in the TRRC, in their report, they highlighted a lot of the violations that occurred happen under security institutions like detentions and stuff, including torture, murders, disappearances, as well as sexual violence. So we really need to work on these reforms as part of our transitional justice. We understand also that there are some applications for amnesties. So some of the individuals who gave testimonies to the TRRC, who felt that they've told the truth, they've shared at the best of their knowledge, they are also seeking amnesty for the crimes they've committed. But there are also many legal reforms that are currently ongoing to make it possible for us to advance our post-TRRC process. So in conclusion, as I said in the beginning, the Gambia TRRC process really internationally is being hailed as a model. There are other countries that have had truth commissions, but their reports are not out, they don't know what the findings were, or there are no government actions into implementing recommendations that they have. Our TRRC also is considered to be inclusive, because this is all part of that inclusion, that we utilize both formal and informal mechanisms to make sure that our process reach people. Yes, of course, there were challenges in reaching all victims. We know that there are still victims out there who didn't even participate in the TRRC, and I understand that this is something that is being considered in the post-TRRC process, particularly in relation to reparations, when reparations are being granted. Under the Ministry of Justice, there is also a unit that has been established, the post-TRRC unit, that is supporting. We civil society organizations are working closely, particularly the AVLO, which is the victim-led organizations that have come together to continue supporting the process of the post-TRRC. We've been working closely with the PTU to support engagements, including similar engagements like today, reaching communities as well. Of course, we've also had prosecutions under the universal jurisdictions. These are people that had committed crimes in the Gambia and moved to other countries. So far, we've had 3 prosecutions. One is the Bailo trial in Germany, who was convicted on crimes that he committed in the Gambia. We also had of the case of Usman Sonko, who was prosecuted in Switzerland and has also been sentenced. And the most recent case of Michael Correa in the US, who's also been found guilty on counts of torture, and it's awaiting sentencing later this summer. So there are a lot of other things that are happening. Excuse me. However, there remains challenges in the implementation of these recommendations. The atmosphere at the moment, particularly with regards to funding to fund these processes, we all know the atmosphere at the moment with international support is very limited, and that is affecting our processes. But also, some of these crimes that were committed in the Gambia, we didn't have the laws for them. So this is why part of this post-TRRC process is also enacting the legal framework to allow us to prosecute certain violations. So another challenge is for a multi-sectoral approach. A lot of people see the TRRC and as, yes, the Ministry of Justice may be the leading government institution, but there is a need for a multi-sectoral approach where other institutions, other government institutions have responsibilities. The TRRC recommendations are not just about prosecutions. One thing that as an advocate against sexual and gender-based violence, one of the things I appreciate about the TRRC recommendations is how broad they are. They go beyond prosecutions and accountability to addressing social issues, because you know, I think we all remember back in the days when we used to say that, oh, these people that are committing these crimes, they are not Gambians. Yaya Jammeh has gone to Liberia or Sierra Leone, the ex-rebels. They are the ones that he brought to Gambia to commit these crimes. That's what I used to hear, and I'm sure many people had those stories. However, what the TRRC showed us, it was our own Gambian brothers and sisters that were committing these crimes. So violence does not occur in a vacuum. There are usually conditions that make it possible for violations to happen. So if we are to have a successful implementation of the TRRC recommendations, we must also look at our society, the factors, the enabling factors, the social norms and cultural beliefs. One classic example that I always give also is the Jammeh's witch hunt. If Gambians didn't believe witches and wizards existed, would Jammeh have gone into our communities and arrest our elders and accuse them of being witches? So this is what I appreciate about the TRRC recommendations. It looks beyond prosecutions and encourages civil society organizations as well as government institutions, even within our own community structures, like our community leaders, our religious leaders. Everybody has a role to play in advancing our post-TRRC process and also in the implementation of the recommendations. And finally, national ownership, which actually also touched on what I just concluded. National ownership, and this is why we are here today. We hope that today, when you all go home, you identify as someone who has a role to play in this process, in the post-TRRC process. We hope you take the messages home and continue the conversation, because every other day we are seeing on social media people saying that we wish Jammeh was back. We are seeing that. It's like we forgot what we saw on the TRRC. So we must continue this conversation. And I also want to take this opportunity to encourage the diaspora to continue being part of this process, to support the post-TRRC process as we move along. Thank you again for listening.
Thank you so much, Fatu, for that overview. I believe all of us now either understand or are reminded of the whole processes. And I'm glad that you also showed some love to your sister organizations in the Gambia who've been working in transitional justice processes. And I see some school children attending. Some of you are going to school. Fantanka has a child-friendly report of the TRRC. So, and the child-friendly report of the TRRC from Fantanka is distributed free of charge. I'm not sure how to get it, but this is something that you can look into if you are still going to school and you want a more friendly approach to the TRRC as school-going children. You can get that and then read it. And Fatu, you highlighted a very, very important part of your presentation, which is the fact that Gambians will still go online and post that Jammeh should come. When Yaya Jammeh comes, things are going to change. So Gambia is a very, very small community. If your uncle is not affected by Yaya Jammeh, your auntie is affected. A friend of your friend is affected. So because Gambia is very small, each person, in a way, was affected by the actions of Yaya Jammeh. For example, I am affected by the actions of Yaya Jammeh because when I was going to school, we used to be forced to go and wave Yaya Jammeh. We used to miss school time. Instead of being in class, learning, our teachers would force us, put us in vehicles, sandwich us, and then take us on the highway, no food, no drink, nothing, by force to wave at Yaya Jammeh. So indirectly, I am a victim because back in primary school, I used to go through that. So do not think we are not victim. Indirectly, you can be. So it's totally unjustifiable to say, Yaya Jammeh should come back. When he comes, things are going to change. And also, Fatu, she forgot herself because she's part of individuals who came back to Gambia after being 16 years away from Gambia, residing in the United Kingdom. She came back as part of an individual who has lived in the diaspora to come back, start up an organization called Will to contribute. So we are not really thanking enough individuals from the diaspora who came back. We really appreciate the work that you have done. And during the time of Yaya Jammeh, economically, Gambia was very, very difficult. And remittances kept coming, you know it or not, which was supporting households and communities in the Gambia. So give it up for individuals from the diaspora. We really appreciate your intervention. So we will now go for a group photo. But before that, I saw a creative interlude and Bright Stars Entertainment is around. Before we get into the actual seriousness, the heated conversations and the suggestions, maybe we can just cool it off. Should we cool it off? Okay, it's Bright Star around. I saw them somewhere. Yeah, we have Bright Stars Entertainment here. So, or we should go for a, okay, so after the group photo, so you want us to go out, come back? Yes. And then we have it? Yes. Okay, so let's have a suspense then. While you guys have the group photo, you can look forward to what Bright Stars Entertainment will be doing. Let's go out for that. Thank you.
Hi. So, after Bright Star,
Okay.
so then we have like okay. The pond.
Yeah, she's actually my sister.
Oh yeah, she told me she's my mentee. So I wanted her to come before Bright Star, but then it's all extensive.
We can have her first.
Yeah.
Because if not, people would come.
Exactly my point. Yeah. So when we're back, I have
We have her then.
come on now.